You're turning in your Bibles to the 15th Psalm. Come to that part of our worship where we show our honor to God by honoring His Word. And it's such a beautiful Word that we have. You just never tire of reading the Bible. And not only does it contain great, precious truths and guidance for us on how we're to live, it's presented to us in the most beautiful way. The Psalms are poetry. And we see the elements of poetry in these Psalms, and by pointing this out, I think it helps us appreciate the beauty of what we're seeing here, and this Psalm certainly does have a lot of that poetry. Let's read it, and I want to point out some things to it. It's poetry. And remember how Hebrew poetry works? It's not so much a poetry of the words as it is a poetry of thought. And one thought is laid right alongside another thought in parallel. And that's how this psalm is as it opens up. Look at the parallel in Psalm 15:1. Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? You see the parallel? We'll get back to that in a minute. The answer comes next. And there are three positives. He that walketh uprightly, and worketh righteousness, and speaketh the truth in his heart. And that's who will dwell in the holy hill. Okay, there's three negatives. He that backbiteth not with his tongue, nor doeth evil to his neighbor, nor taketh up a reproach against his neighbor. You see the three negatives? And then there's three doubles. Three doubles. Follow that. In whose eyes a vile person is contemned, but he honoreth them that fear the Lord. Second double. He that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. Third double. He that putteth not out his money to usury, nor taketh reward against the innocent. And then the psalm ends. He that doeth these things shall never be moved. Well, isn't that just a simple psalm full of very simple, practical, plain admonitions, and put together, the thoughts just laid out together in a very beautiful way. No wonder people will just read and read and read their Bibles, and they go back and read it again, and once they start understanding the truths and then see how those truths are presented, it just makes the Bible such a beautiful book. Well, let's look at this. This is pretty simple, but there's some depth, some spiritual depth to this. Look at this parallel. Who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? You see the parallel there, don't you? The tabernacle and the holy hill. You know what a tabernacle is? A tabernacle is a tent. I want you to think of a hill. And on that hill there's a tent. Well, you know what a tent is? A tent is kind of a flimsy structure. It's something erected by man. And by calling it a tabernacle, it sounds like a holy tent. Now, that's not really what the word tabernacle means, but this is a psalm of David. You see the inscription? It's a psalm of David. And David wanted to build a temple, a building on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. God said, no, David, the way you've lived and what you've had to do and all the blood you've shed, I don't want you doing that. Now, you can get things ready, but I want your son Solomon to actually build that temple. So David wasn't able to build the temple, but the ark of God was in a tent. And he thought, why should the ark of God dwell in a tent while we live in all these nice houses? I want to build a temple up on that hill. Well, David wasn't able to build it, but he did move the ark to Mount Zion. Remember that? Where'd they keep the ark? They must put a tent. Built a tent up there over the ark and kept the ark in that tent. And that may have something to do with this psalm. It didn't have to, but this being a psalm of David, kind of knowing that was part of the history here. So he brings the ark to Jerusalem, sets it up in a tent there on Mount Zion, that holy hill, where he wants to build the temple someday. But then he writes the psalm. The tabernacle, just a little flimsy structure built by man. And now you've got this hill. And this is a permanent topographic feature of the landscape is made by God. You see how those thoughts parallel? And usually in this parallel, you've got one thought and the other thought carries you deeper into the significance of it. And that's what's happening here. It also works with the words dwell, abide, and dwell. So you look them up in the Hebrew. You can get these Hebrew dictionaries and numbers of the words and all. You don't even have to know the Hebrew language. You can probably do it on your phone today, if you get the right little app and all, and punch on that word abide. To abide means to live for an extended time. That's what it means to abide. Who's going to be able to live for an extended time in that tent? But then to dwell. You see, abide is what you do when you're a guest. You come and you stay for an extended time. But to dwell, look up that word, that's just to make yourself at home. To move right in, make it your home. You see, the temporary dwelling of the tent, you're going to stay there for an extended time, but then you're going to just make yourself at home on that holy hill. Well, that parallel here just shows the beauty of how David would write out this. That is poetry, what we're talking about. It's not about rhyme, it's not even about rhythm, but it's that poetry of thought that goes into every language. And so understanding it, it just makes the psalm more beautiful, doesn't it? All right, now let's look at the answer. He that walketh uprightly and worketh righteousness and speaketh the truth in his heart. Three things. We'll go ahead and talk about working righteousness. When you're looking at the word righteousness, it has different meaning in Scriptures, but in this context, it really has to do with treating other people right. In fact, most of the things he's talking about who's going to dwell on that hill, has to do with treating your neighbor right, treating your fellow man right. Let's go back. What he's asking. Who will dwell in the tent and who will abide on the holy hill? Here's what he said. Who can remain in fellowship with God? How do you stay in good standing with God? We come to God as a sinner. We're going to abide with God. We abide with Him as a saint, don't we? How are we to conduct ourselves and behave ourselves? You remember that little bluegrass song that came out, and the lady singing it says, if you don't love your neighbor, then you don't love God. And a lot of the things he's going to talk about here has to do with how we treat our fellow man. He who worketh righteousness deals with his man just in a just manner, in a good way. But notice what also he said first. He that walketh uprightly. That's how man walks. Stands right up straight. Most of the animals don't do that. You look at you look at the snake in the Garden of Eden, had to crawl around on his belly. He didn't walk upright. And you take most animals, they're on their all fours, and when they're alive, they're just looking down. What does a man do? A man's standing upright. Think of that posture. In fact, it says in Ecclesiastes 7:20, God made man upright. Milton was a poet, probably one of the great, great English poets that wrote that long poem, Paradise Lost. I don't know if you've ever read that, but see, I enjoy things like that. I'll get down, I can just spend a few hours just absorbing the beauty of that poem. But part of this poem, the devil shows up in the Garden of Eden. You know what the Garden of Eden is? Eden means delight. The devil shows up. He comes as a form of a serpent. And he calls him here the fiend. Now this isn't Bible, this is Milton, but I want to notice how Milton captured this thought here. The fiend saw undelighted all delight. He wasn't happy to see this delightful garden. Not the fiend sneaking through that garden of delight. He was undelighted with all the delight he saw. All kinds of living creatures, new and strange, two far nobler in shape, erect and tall, God-like, erect. Man's made in the image of God. It doesn't mean that man it looks like God. It's talking about spiritually what man is. But notice how He made us. We don't go around on all fours. God made man to walk upright. And so that very idea, to be able to stand on your own 2 feet and look upright, that is we walk with integrity and a nobleness about man. You want to dwell in that temple with God? Live in such a way you can hold your head up. Walk upright. Work righteousness with your neighbor. And then he said this, speaketh the truth in his heart. You know, the heart is deceitful above all things. And you can lie. You can deceive people. But the saddest folks I know are the people that deceive themselves. You can actually tell a lie to yourself and believe your own falsehood. We read in James, be ye doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. You might be able to deceive others. And sadly, you can deceive yourself, but God is not mocked. You can't deceive God. In fact, carry your ideas and thoughts to God in prayer. You might be fooling yourself, but you go to your closet and shut the door and pray to God, and it's useless to try to lie to God. You know He knows. You can't do it. You want to find what honesty and truth is like? Go to God in prayer, and you'll be honest there. You have to be if you dare approach Him in prayer. And so don't deceive yourselves in your own heart. So there's the three very positives. Now there's some negatives here. It says, he that backbiteth not with his tongue. Well, you know, the tongue, James tells us the tongue is an unruly member that no man can tame. And people say things, and sometimes people say something, and what do you want to do? Well, you want to you want to bite back, don't you? Like they're going to say something about me, I'm going to say something about them. But don't do that. Don't do that. And then talking about people behind their backs. Did I tell you that story about a secretary? One of the offices I managed, the secretary came to me, and a fellow wanted to talk to me in private. So he came in the office, and I talked to him a few minutes, and he left. He had some private things that he wanted to talk to a supervisor about. I understand that, so we talked in private. When he left, my secretary says, come here. So I walked out of the office, walked over, she looked around. She wanted to leave the office, says, come on outside. So we stepped outside the office. And she looked around out there, and she said, come on. And we walked away and around the corner of the building. And when nobody could see us, she says, you've got to watch out for that guy. He talks about people behind their back. Well, he that backbiteth not with his tongue. Okay? It's all about how you, just the respect you show, but don't go around talking about people, bad things about them behind their back, nor doeth evil to his neighbor. You see how much this has to do with how you treat your fellow man? And then he says, nor taketh up a reproach against his neighbor. Compare that to that backbiteth not. You see, it's one thing to go around talking about your neighbor behind their back, but it's another thing to sit there and listen to that kind of stuff, to take up that reproach. Tell you, if somebody's wanting to spread bad words and bad gossip, and they don't have anybody listen to them, say, we're not We just want to listen to it. We're not going to say it. No, don't listen to it either. Just, I don't want to hear that. I just don't want to hear anything about that. And so it has to do with how you treat your neighbor. Let's look at these three doubles now. The three doubles. In whose eyes a vile person is contained. You know what contained is? That's held them in contempt. Look how that compares to the one you honor. But you honor them that fear the Lord. The contemned here said it in contrast to the honor. So a vile person, you don't honor people that are vile. Now the world does. They make heroes out of the vile. But not those that want to dwell with God. You don't honor. You have contempt for that kind of behavior. But you honor those that fear the Lord. Here's the next one. He that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. You want to dwell with God? You be a man of your word. You say yea, mean yea. You say no, mean no. If you say before God I will do this, or God is my witness, then don't take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. You better keep your word. Even if it hurts. Sometimes, well, I promised, but the situation changed. Well, you still made a promise, didn't you? Look, a good name is to be chosen, the great riches. It might cost you to keep your word, but it'll give you a good name, and that's better than great riches. We're warned about making oaths. Be careful before you bring God into your promise. Ecclesiastes 5, 2 through 7. Be not rash with thy mouth, and let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. When thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better it is that thou shouldest not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. Suffer not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. Neither say thou before an angel, it was an error. Well, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean to. I didn't know it was going to change on me. No, don't say that. Fear God. And so you want to dwell with God, you be a person of integrity. Keep your word. And then he that putteth not out his money to usury, nor taketh reward against the innocent. Now, usury is interest. Well, I know there's a time value of money that everyone understands, and so I'll loan you the money with this interest because you're going to have the use of that money, and that's worth something, and I won't have it, so you'll pay me back for that. And we understand that, but this is really talking about taking advantage of people. Finding people that are down on the luck, so boy, I've got them now, and yeah, I'll give it, but then charging these exorbitant rates, you know, and really taking advantage of people and hurting people because you've got the advantage here. Now, don't do that. Don't do that. That's not the way you treat your neighbor, and that's not the way you're going to dwell with God. And so with these instructions, with these three positives, and these three negatives, and then these three doubles, he says, he that doeth these things shall never be moved. What's that mean? It means you don't have to move out of the tent. You don't have to move off the hill. You can stay right there in fellowship with God. Isn't that a beautiful psalm? Now, one of the prophets seemed like maybe he preached from this psalm. Isaiah uses words very similar to this. It's almost as though Isaiah must have read this Psalm of David and incorporated something similar into one of his sermons. I want you to look at it in Isaiah 33, 14 through 17. And he's talking about the judgment of God coming across the land as a fire. How do you keep from being burned when the judgment of the Lord comes? Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? That was Isaiah's question, but it sounds kind of like this that David had asked. It says, he that walketh righteously and speaketh uprightly, he that despiseth the gain of oppressors, that shaketh his hands from holding of bribes, that stoppeth his ears from hearing of blood, that shutteth his eyes from seeing evil. Then here's what he gets. He shall dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him. His water shall be sure. And thine eyes shall see the King in his beauty. You want to stay in fellowship with God? You want to see the King in His beauty? Now just treat your neighbor right. That's what you do. Now that's not all of it, but that certainly is part of it here. This idea of remaining with God is an idea that's taught in the New Testament. Jesus said in John 15:4-6, "Abide with me, and I with you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself except it abide in the vine, no more can ye except ye abide with me. He that abideth with me, and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit. If a man abide not in me, he's cast forth in a branch and is withered." You don't just come to God. You need to stay with God and abide with God. We find it in 1 Peter 1:5-10. "Besides all this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue. And to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity." The word is love, but that word charity carries the idea of love in action. If you do these things, you'll never fall. And then 1 John 1:7, "If we walk in the light as He is in the light, we have fellowship one with another, and the blood of Jesus Christ cleanseth us from sin." This idea of walking in the light is continuously staying in the light. And then the cleansing is a continuously cleansing from sin. That doesn't mean you're perfect. Doesn't mean you never make a mistake. But you know when you're in the light, and you know when you're in the darkness. Now just stay in the light and abide with God and dwell with Him. Now that opening line, "Who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill?" Well, one of the comments I read on this that I thought it was interesting, he sort of used this as an analogy to talk about being in the church now and then being with God in heaven eternally. And that does sort of fit this, abiding in the tabernacle of being in the church and dwelling on the hill of making your home there in that holy hill up in heaven. And that fits. And perhaps as an analogy or as an illustration, but having read that and thinking about this, I thought of this. This is in the New Testament as well. And it's the same teaching. It's different words, but it's the same teaching. And see if you recognize it. Matthew 25:31-40. "When the Son of Man shall come in His glory, and all the holy angels with Him, then shall He sit upon the throne of His glory, and before Him shall be gathered all nations. And He shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth the sheep from the goats. And He shall set the sheep on His right hand, but the goats on His left. Then shall the King say unto them on His right hand, Come, ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." Notice what he emphasizes here. "For I was hungry, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then shall the righteous answer, saying him, Lord, when saw we thee and hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? Or when saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick in prison and came unto thee?" Here's the answer. "The King shall answer and say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you've done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me." Goes back again then to how you treat your neighbor, doesn't it? See someone in need, see someone in sick, see someone needing help. You know what you think? That's one of my Lord's brethren. I'll help them. The Lord says, you do it to the least of these my brethren. You've done it to me. You've done it for me. And so it's a beautiful little psalm then. If we want to dwell with God, We're going to dwell with God. Now, part of this isn't the total thing, but part of this just has to do with simple, basic goodness and kindness extended toward our fellow man. We treat those who we see, if we love those who we see, how are we going to love God whom we have not seen? No, if you don't love your neighbor, you don't love God. And so there's the invitation. Now, what you need to do, that's not all of it. You also need to obey the gospel. You can't just be good to folks and think that's going to get a ticket to heaven. No, you got to obey the gospel. You got to come to the Lord and believing He is the Son of God, turn from your sin, confess His name before men, be baptized into Christ, and then rise to walk in newness of life. And if you haven't done that, you need to do that. And having done that, you need to exhibit those attributes of God by how you treat your fellow man. So you need to respond to the invitation. Do it as we stand and sing this morning.